A small-town waitress married a homeless man just to make her grandmother's birthday wish come true, only to discover he was a billionaire in hiding. What he did next left the entire town speechless. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Charlotte Miller had no idea how much one act of kindness would change her life forever. In the quiet town of Willow Creek, nestled among the rolling hills of Tennessee, lived Charlotte Miller, a 32-year-old waitress known for her gentle spirit and unwavering kindness. Every morning before the diner opened, she packed an extra meal, sometimes a hot sandwich, sometimes a slice of homemade pie, and carried it quietly across the street to a worn-down bench by the old courthouse. Sitting there was Mason Brooks, a scruffy, soft-spoken man everyone else hurried past without a second glance. Charlotte never asked questions. She never expected gratitude. To her, Mason wasn't just a homeless man, he was a human being who deserved dignity, even when the world chose to ignore him. Some days, all they exchanged were a few shy smiles. Other days, he offered a quiet thank you that warmed her heart more than the Tennessee sun. Life in Willow Creek was simple but tough. Charlotte worked double shifts to pay rent on her tiny apartment and to save a little extra to help her aging grandmother. Yet no matter how tired or broke she felt, she always made sure Mason had something to eat. What she didn't know was that this small act of kindness was about to change her life forever, and uncover secrets far beyond anything she could imagine. It was a Friday afternoon, and the summer heat hung heavy in the air as Charlotte wiped down tables at the diner. The bell above the door chimed, but it wasn't a customer this time. It was Connor Hayes, her boyfriend of 5 years, walking in, his arms slung casually around another woman. It wasn't just any woman. It was her best friend, Grace. The world tilted beneath Charlotte's feet. She stood frozen, rag still clutched in her hand, as Connor whispered something into Grace's ear that made her giggle. Their betrayal burned into Charlotte's chest like a brand. Neither of them even noticed her standing there, heartbreaking in real time. Fighting back tears, Charlotte stormed out the back door, the world around her blurring. She felt foolish, humiliated, and so utterly alone. That's when she found herself, almost by instinct, heading toward the courthouse bench, the place where she always left food for Mason. To her surprise, he was still there, sipping coffee from a chipped mug, his gray hoodie pulled low over his brow. Without thinking, she slumped onto the bench beside him. The words poured out before she could stop them, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the raw, aching loneliness. Mason listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable but his presence comforting. After a long silence, he spoke in a voice roughened by years of hardship but filled with surprising warmth. "Maybe what you need," he said slowly, "is a little crazy. Something to remind yourself you're still alive." Charlotte let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, like what? Marry a stranger?" Mason's lips quirked into a smile. "Could be worse. You'd at least have a partner in crime for a day." The idea started as a joke, a desperate, reckless fantasy. But the more they talked, the less crazy it seemed. Charlotte's grandmother, the woman who raised her after her parents' death, had been dreaming of seeing Charlotte walk down the aisle. Her 80th birthday was only days away, and Charlotte couldn't bear to disappoint her. And so, under the golden light of the setting sun and the boldness that only heartbreak can summon, Charlotte made a wild, unthinkable decision. She turned to Mason, this man she barely knew but who had shown her more kindness in one afternoon than Connor had in months, and whispered, "Marry me. Just for one day." Mason stared at her, the corners of his eyes crinkling with an emotion she couldn't quite place. Then, with a small nod, he answered simply, "Okay." It wasn't love. It wasn't forever. It was survival. And it was about to change everything. The morning of their wedding, Charlotte stood in front of the cracked mirror in her tiny apartment, her hands trembling as she pinned back loose strands of hair. She wore a simple white sundress, nothing fancy, but it was clean, soft, and it made her feel, just for a moment, like someone worthy of love. Mason arrived right on time, wearing an ill-fitting navy suit borrowed from a neighbor. He looked uncomfortable, tugging at the stiff collar, but when he saw Charlotte, a quiet awe flickered across his face. "You look beautiful," he said, the words rough but sincere. The ceremony was held in her grandmother's sun-drenched backyard, surrounded by wildflowers and a few folding chairs. Only close family attended, most of them misty-eyed, thinking this was the start of a fairy tale. Charlotte played her part, smiling through the nerves and guilt twisting in her stomach. Mason, surprisingly, played his role perfectly, gentle, respectful, and somehow making it feel less like a lie. When it came time for the vows, they kept it simple. A few promises of kindness, laughter, and patience. No grand declarations, no illusions of forever. Yet when Mason slid the thin silver ring onto Charlotte's finger, a strange heaviness settled in her chest, a feeling she hadn't expected. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't as fake as she told herself it was. After the ceremony, as her grandmother wiped away happy tears and insisted on taking dozens of photos, Charlotte caught Mason watching her with a look so raw it made her heart skip a beat. She quickly brushed it off. This was temporary. Just for show. It meant nothing, right? Later that evening, after everyone had left and the dishes were piled in the sink, Charlotte found Mason sitting alone on the porch, staring up at the stars. She brought him a slice of leftover cake and sat beside him. "You didn't have to do all this," she said softly. Mason smiled faintly. "Maybe I needed it too." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the cicadas humming in the warm Tennessee night. For the first time in what felt like years, Charlotte didn't feel alone. It was in that fragile, beautiful moment that Charlotte noticed the way Mason spoke, with an ease and intelligence that didn't match the life of a man who had been sleeping on a park bench. His stories about faraway places, his sharp, observant eyes, his posture, everything hinted at a past far different from what he showed the world. A tiny seed of suspicion was planted in her mind, but it was quickly drowned out by the comfort she felt. After all, she thought, what did it matter? Their little arrangement would end soon enough. What she didn't know was that Mason Brooks wasn't just hiding from the cold nights on the streets. He was hiding from a life he desperately wanted to forget, a life filled with power, betrayal, and secrets that could shatter everything she thought she knew. A few days after the ceremony, Charlotte's life slipped back into its usual rhythm: work, bills, loneliness. The fake marriage was supposed to be a one-time thing, but somehow, Mason lingered. He fixed the leaky faucet in her apartment, helped her carry groceries, stayed late talking about everything and nothing. Against her better judgment, Charlotte found herself laughing more, smiling easier, and wondering less about the ache Connor had left behind. One evening, while scrolling absent-mindedly through her phone after her shift, Charlotte stumbled across a news article that froze her blood. Heir to Whitmore Industries still missing, family offers $5 million reward. There, in the grainy photograph under the headline, was a much younger, cleaner-shaven version of Mason Brooks. Only, the name under the photo wasn't Mason Brooks. It was Mason Whitmore. Charlotte's heart pounded so loud she thought the neighbors might hear. She clicked the article with shaking fingers, her mind spinning. The details were almost impossible to believe. Mason Whitmore, tech billionaire, vanished after a scandal involving embezzlement and betrayal at his family's company. A man once worth billions now wandering her small town disguised as a nobody. Her world tilted. She felt betrayed, foolish, played for a fool by a man who had lied to her every single day. Fueled by a mix of anger and heartbreak, she stormed into the living room where Mason sat repairing a wobbly chair. He looked up and instantly knew something had shattered between them. "Who are you?" she demanded, holding out her phone with the damning photo. Mason didn't flinch. He just sighed, setting down his tools with an almost painful slowness. "I'm still me, Charlotte," he said quietly. "The man you've been sharing late-night talks and pie slices with. The man who..." His voice caught, but he pushed forward. "The man who didn't want you to see him as a paycheck. Or a scandal. Or a news story." Her hands trembled. "You lied to me." "I hid," he corrected softly. I hid because the life I left behind destroyed everything good I ever touched. I didn't want it to destroy you, too. The anger inside Charlotte wrestled with something more dangerous, something softer. She wanted to scream, to shove him out the door, to protect herself from more heartbreak. But deep down, a voice whispered that Mason had never treated her like someone he could buy or use. He had never once acted like a billionaire. He had acted like a man who knew what it was to lose everything, and still choose kindness. Still, the betrayal stung. I need time, Charlotte said, her voice shaking but firm. Mason nodded, the sadness in his eyes almost unbearable. Take all the time you need. As she closed the door behind him, Charlotte slid down to the floor, heart aching, mind spinning. She didn't know if she could ever trust Mason again. But even through the storm of emotions, one truth burned stubbornly inside her. Everything she had felt, the laughter, the connection, the comfort, had been real. And no amount of secrets could erase that. The days that followed felt endless. Charlotte threw herself into work, hoping that the clatter of dishes and the hum of small-town gossip would drown out the ache Mason had left behind. Yet no matter how busy she stayed, she couldn't escape the memories, the quiet conversations on the porch, the way Mason's eyes softened when he looked at her, the laughter that felt so rare, so real. One evening, after a long shift, she found an envelope taped to her apartment door. No name. No address. Just her name, written in Mason's familiar scrawl. Inside was a letter. Charlotte. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I want you to know the truth. He wrote about his life before Willow Creek, the pressure of living up to a family name, the betrayal by those he trusted most, and the scandal that made him walk away from billions to find peace. He confessed that meeting her wasn't part of any plan. He had intended to stay invisible. But then came her smile. Her stubborn kindness. Her refusal to treat him like anything less than a human being. You made me want to be seen again, the letter ended. Not as Mason Whitmore, but simply as Mason. Tears blurred Charlotte's vision. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into the drawer by her bed, not ready to let go, not ready to forgive, but unable to ignore the way her heart ached for him. Over the next few days, small surprises appeared around town. A bouquet of wildflowers left at her doorstep. A donation made anonymously to the local shelter where she volunteered. A paperback copy of her favorite novel, worn but lovingly wrapped, tucked under her windshield wiper with a note, thought you might need a little escape today. Mason was still reaching out, not demanding, not pleading, just quietly reminding her of what they had built before the truth came crashing down. Meanwhile, whispers started swirling through Willow Creek. News had broken that Mason Whitmore was alive. Reporters and lawyers flooded the town, desperate for a scoop or a lawsuit. Charlotte watched from the sidelines as Mason, no longer hiding, walked into the town hall with his shoulders squared and his head high. Instead of running, he faced the storm. He cleared his name, exposing the real culprits behind the embezzlement that had once destroyed him. He wasn't doing it to reclaim his fortune, he was doing it to reclaim his honor. And Charlotte realized something she hadn't dared admit before. Mason didn't just want a second chance for himself. He wanted a second chance with her, too. The opportunity was hers to take. All she had to decide was whether she could trust her heart enough to grab it. Charlotte stood by the window of her small apartment, staring out at the fading light over Willow Creek. She clutched Mason's letter in her hand, reading the last line over and over. Deep inside, a battle raged, a war between fear and hope, between the hurt she carried and the forgiveness she craved. She thought back to the night on the porch, the easy way Mason had listened, the silent comfort he had offered. None of that had been a lie. None of that could have been faked. Maybe Mason hadn't trusted her with the whole truth. But when she stripped away the headlines, the scandal, the money, he had trusted her with something even more precious, his heart. It wasn't just Mason who had hidden. Charlotte realized she had been hiding too, hiding behind her fear of being hurt again, of not being enough, of believing that real love wasn't meant for someone like her. If she wanted something real, she would have to risk everything. The next morning, Charlotte made a choice. She pulled on her old boots, grabbed her truck keys, and drove across town to the courthouse where she knew Mason would be. Her heart pounded with every step she took up the stone stairs, fear clawing at her chest. But she didn't turn back. Pushing through the heavy doors, she spotted him immediately. Mason stood across the room, surrounded by reporters and flashing cameras. He looked tired but determined, answering questions with quiet dignity. As if sensing her, he turned, and their eyes locked. Time seemed to freeze. Charlotte didn't wait for permission. She marched across the room, ignoring the stares, ignoring the murmurs. She stopped right in front of him, voice shaking but clear. "You forgot something," she said. Mason's brow furrowed. "What?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out the thin silver ring he had slipped onto her finger during their fake wedding. She placed it into his hand and closed his fingers around it. "You didn't just marry me to help me. You made me believe in something again. In you. In us." Mason's throat worked as he swallowed hard. For the first time in front of the flashing cameras, his composure cracked. The man the world saw, the billionaire, the headline, faded away. And all that remained was Mason, raw and real. Charlotte took a shaky breath. "I'm scared. I'm angry. But I'm also tired of running. If you still want me, I'm here." For a moment, Mason just stared at her, as if afraid to believe it was real. Then he pulled her into his arms, the room erupting in flashes and gasps, but neither of them cared. In that embrace, Charlotte found something she thought she had lost forever. Home. Not a place. Not a fairy tale. But a person. A beginning built not on perfection, but on broken pieces lovingly put back together. Weeks passed, and the town of Willow Creek slowly adjusted to the shocking reality that a billionaire had been hiding in plain sight. Some folks gossiped. Others offered Mason cautious handshakes and awkward congratulations. But Charlotte and Mason didn't care about the whispers anymore. They had each other. That was enough. Instead of returning to the glittering world he had left behind, Mason chose a different path. He bought a small farmhouse just outside of town, the kind with a wide front porch, creaky wood floors, and enough land to build a future from scratch. Charlotte moved in with him, bringing nothing more than a few boxes, a battered guitar, and a heart full of cautious hope. Their days were simple but rich. Coffee on the porch at sunrise. Long walks through the fields with muddy boots and laughter echoing into the hills. Nights spent dancing barefoot in the living room to old country records. There were still scars, still nights when fear crept in, still moments when the weight of the past seemed too heavy. But they faced it together, hand in hand, no longer pretending to be perfect, no longer hiding. One crisp autumn afternoon, Mason took Charlotte to the big oak tree at the edge of their property, the one she had fallen in love with on their very first visit. There, beneath its golden leaves, he knelt down, not with a flashy diamond, but with the simple silver ring he had once placed on her finger in a pretend ceremony. Only this time, it was real. "I don't have a perfect life to offer you," Mason said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just a messy, beautiful one, with me, if you'll have it." Tears streamed down Charlotte's face as she laughed and nodded. "I wouldn't want anything else." They married under that same oak tree with just a handful of friends and family, their real family. No fancy gowns, no media circus, just love, pure and unfiltered. As Mason slipped the ring back onto her finger, Charlotte realized something powerful. The fairy tale wasn't about mansions, riches, or grand gestures. It was about finding someone who saw you, all your cracks, your scars, your fears, and choosing you anyway. Their story wasn't perfect. It was honest. It was hard-won. And it was theirs. As the sun dipped low over the Tennessee hills, Charlotte leaned her head against Mason's shoulder, smiling at the life they were building from the ground up, one small act of kindness, one brave leap of faith at a time. And for the first time in forever, she knew. She was exactly where she was meant to be. True love isn't about finding someone with a perfect past or a flawless life. It's about discovering someone who chooses you every day, even when life is messy, uncertain, and hard. Charlotte and Mason's journey taught us that trust isn't built on grand promises or wealth, it's built on small, consistent acts of kindness, honesty, and forgiveness. Sometimes, the people who seem the most broken are the ones capable of the deepest love. And sometimes, the life we dream about doesn't come wrapped in perfection, it comes in quiet moments, brave choices, and the courage to believe in second chances. Love isn't about pretending everything is okay. It's about saying, I see your scars, and I'm staying anyway. It's about choosing each other, not just on the easy days, but especially on the hard ones. Because real love? It's not perfect. It's just real. In our own lives, it's easy to focus on appearances, past mistakes, or fairy tale expectations. But true connection happens when we see beyond all that, when we offer grace, patience, and genuine kindness. The next time someone in your life needs understanding, remember Charlotte's courage. The next time fear tells you to run from something real, remember Mason's bravery. Real love and real trust are built day by day, moment by moment. And sometimes, all it takes to change your story forever is one small act of kindness, one choice to believe in someone when the world tells you not to. Don't look for perfect. Look for real. What did you think of Charlotte and Mason's journey? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Rate this story from 0 to 10, we'd love to hear your score. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. For more heartwarming and emotional stories, just click right here on the final screen.